As children, we are often put to sleep with stories meant to comfort us in the dark and spark our imagination. As we grow up, these stories evolve to carry deeper meanings that guide us on our path in life. However, despite the enduring magic of these tales, their true meanings are often overlooked in modern adaptations through film and art. The cheerful elements like songs, dances, and fairy tale magic often overshadow darker, more troubling aspects of these ancient stories. It becomes fascinating to delve into these tales from the perspective of their original authors, uncovering the often unsettling themes that are hidden beneath the surface, especially when viewed through the innocent lens of childhood. Hi, I'm Alina. Welcome back to my channel. The tale of Hansel and Gretel, crafted by the Brothers Grimm, Jacob and Wilhelm, remains one of their most twisted stories. Set against the bleak drop of a German village, suffering from a severe famine, the story carries a dark theme of child abduction. The story follows Hansel and Gretel, a brother and sister, who are loved by their father but despised by their wicked stepmother. Due to their poverty, their stepmother decides they can no longer afford to feed two extra mouths. She persuades her husband to take the children deep into the woods and abandon them. Despite his love for his children, the father agrees and leaves Hansel and Gretel alone in the middle of a dark forest. Hansel, thinking ahead, drops breadcrumbs or pebbles along the path to help them find their way back. However, as they wander through the forest, they stumble upon a cottage made of gingerbread, a dream come true for two hungry children. Unfortunately, the house belongs to a witch who captures them. She forces Gretel into slavery and regularly checks Hansel to see if he has grown plump enough to eat. As the witch prepares to cook Hansel, Gretel outsmarts her. She pushes the witch into the oven and locks the door, ending her threat. Afterward, the siblings retrace their steps using the breadcrumbs Hansel left earlier and eventually find their way back home. They discover that their father has gotten rid of their stepmother and wants them back. In the end, all is forgiven and they are reunited. A typical resolution in a fairy tale where second chances come easily. The story of Snow White is a classic fairy tale that many people recognize and love. It's famous for its dark forests, poisoned apples, and the complicated relationship between a young princess and her mother. Snow White, the main character, is described as having skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, a reflection of her name. As the story unfolds, we learn that Snow White was born into a wealthy kingdom, but her mother passed away when she was young. Her father remarried, and her new stepmother is not just wicked, but also a powerful sorceress obsessed with her own beauty. This stepmother has a magic mirror, which she regularly consults to confirm that she is the most beautiful woman in the land. However, one day, Mirror tells her that Snow White has grown to be the fairest of them all. Jealous and enraged, the stepmother decides that Snow White must be eliminated. She orders a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. But the plan fails when the huntsman spares the girl's life. Snow White then finds refuge in a home of 7 dwarfs who live deep in the woods. But the stepmother doesn't give up. She devises various schemes to get rid of Snow White, finally succeeding by giving her a poisoned apple. Snow White falls into a deep death-like sleep, and it seems that the stepmother's plan has worked. However, the story takes a miraculous turn when a prince, often referred to as Prince Charming, finds Snow White and awakens her with a kiss, revealing the power of true love. Looking at the story from another angle, it's about a vain woman in her 40s who becomes so consumed by jealousy and the need to be the most beautiful that she tries to kill her stepdaughter, not with a weapon but with a poisoned apple. Even then, her plan ultimately fails because true love conquers all. This story is the one that can really give you chills. It's about a German village that faces a terrible rat infestation. The situation seems hopeless until one day, a strange piper arrives in town, claiming he can solve their problem. He plays a tune on his pipe and amazingly, all the rats follow him into a river where they drown. The village is saved, but when the piper asks for his payment, the townspeople refuse to give him anything. Furious, the piper returns and casts a spell over all the village's children. leading them away from the town, never to be seen again. Now, here's where it gets even darker. There are different versions of how the story ends. In one version, the piper takes the children over the hills and through a portal into a beautiful new land where they live together forever. In a less sinister version, he brings the children back after the villagers agreed to pay him in installments. But the most chilling version has the piper leading the children into the river, just like he did with the rats, drowning every one of them. All the children in the village die, except for a single deaf girl who couldn't hear the piper's music. Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? This question might be more relevant now than ever. In a classic story, Little Red Riding Hood makes her way through a dark forest, one of many she might encounter, to visit her grandmother's house. Along the way, she's followed by a wolf. Let's take a closer look at the wolf. He's portrayed as predatory, sneaky, and even a bit inappropriate. His behavior towards Little Red is unsettling, leading some to interpret the big bad wolf as a symbol of sexual predators. If that's not dark enough, consider this. After the wolf devours both Little Red and her grandmother, a woodcutter arrives, kills the wolf, and frees them. Perhaps this is why we are warned not to talk to strangers. Many fairy tales revolve around bad parenting, and Rapunzel is a prime example. The story begins with a handsome prince discovering a tower where a beautiful maiden with extremely long hair lives. The prince and the maiden seem like a perfect couple, so he begins visiting her often, treating her like his girlfriend. However, he soon learns that she's being guarded by a cruel, overprotective witch. It turns out that Rapunzel was taken from her family by the witch after her father was caught stealing rampions, a type of vegetable, from the witch's garden. The witch made a deal with Rapunzel's parents. They could have all the rampions they wanted for the pregnant mother, but in return they had to give her their firstborn daughter. Years later, Rapunzel is trapped in a tower, completely isolated. One evening, the prince climbs up the tower, using Rapunzel's golden hair as a rope. However, the witch catches him, throws him from the tower into a thorn bush, and he is blinded. The witch then banishes Rapunzel and cruelly cuts off her hair. Despite all this, the story ends on a somewhat happy note. The prince and Rapunzel eventually find each other again and are reunited. Let's revisit the tale of Sleeping Beauty, a story with many variations over time. The first recorded version was written by an Italian poet named Giambattista Basile. Later it was adapted by the French author Charles Perrault, and eventually the Brothers Grimm included it in their collection. We'll focus on Perrault's version, as Basile's version takes on a different direction. In this story, a king and queen from a distant kingdom invite all their fairies in their land to attend the christening of their newborn daughter. However, one fairy is left out. This old fairy arrives at the celebration, and angry about the exclusion, she curses the baby girl to die from a prick on her finger caused by a spinning wheel. Fortunately, another fairy, who is kinder and more compassionate, modifies the curse so that instead of death, the princess will fall into a deep sleep, only to be awakened by a true love's kiss. To protect their daughter, the king orders all the spinning wheels in the kingdom to be burned, but despite his efforts, the curse eventually comes to pass. The princess pricks her finger on a spinning wheel and falls into a coma that lasts for 100 years. After this long sleep, a prince arrives and awakens her with a kiss. However, by the time she wakes up, 100 years have passed. Her family and friends are long gone, leaving her alone with only the prince, a stranger, by her side. Now let's delve into the original tale by Hans Christian Andersen. Unlike the 1989 Disney adaptation, the story is much darker, likely because there are no cheerful songs to lighten the mood. In Andersen's version, mermaids are allowed to swim to the surface of the ocean on their 15th birthday. When the mermaid in the story, let's call her Ariel for clarity, finally reaches the surface, she sees a handsome prince named Eric and falls in love with him. Curious about the human world, Ariel visits her grandmother, who explains that while humans may die, their souls live on in an eternal heaven. In contrast, mermaids have no afterlife. When they die, they simply dissolve into sea foam and cease to exist. This bleak fate sets the stage for the rest of Ariel's story. Desperate to be with Prince Eric, Ariel goes to a sea witch for help. The witch grants her wish to have legs and walk on land, but at a great cost. Ariel has to give up her voice, and the witch even takes her tone as part of the deal. But that's not all. There's an even more harrowing condition. Although Ariel will be able to walk and dance, every step she takes will feel like she's walking on sharp knives, causing her unbearable pain and making her feet bleed. Despite these sacrifices, Ariel's journey to the human world ends tragically. Due to a case of mistaken identity, the prince falls in love with another woman, leaving Ariel heartbroken. In the end, unable to win his love, Ariel chooses to kill herself, and her body dissolves into sea foam just as her grandmother had foretold. Even today, the 1940 film Pinocchio is difficult to watch. The transformation of happy children into scared donkeys and the change of a wooden boy into a human are still unsettling. But the original story of Pinocchio takes place in Italy. It begins with a carpenter who cuts down a pine tree and becomes terrified when the wood speaks to him. Frightened, he decides to give the wood to his poor neighbor, Geppetto. Geppetto carves the wood into the shape of a boy and names him Pinocchio. However, this boy turns out to be very troublesome and has a bad attitude. Not only does he kick Geppetto, but he also runs away into town, leading to his creator being jailed for supposed mistreatment. When Pinocchio returns home, he encounters a talking cricket who tries to teach him the value of kindness. Instead of listening, Pinocchio throws a hammer at the cricket. The story then follows Pinocchio through a series of adventures. He is kidnapped by a fox and a cat and sold to a puppet master. Eventually, Pinocchio learns the importance of being good, and as a result, he is transformed into a human boy. In the original version of the story known as The Little Glass Slipper, there's much less magic and more dark, chilling elements. Cinderella's mother dies from a plague-related illness. Each year, Cinderella visits her mother's grave, but she remains wary of her father's new wife, a vain and arrogant woman with two daughters who are just as wicked. Although her father is aware of this mistreatment, he does nothing to defend his only daughter, highlighting a significant issue with parental neglect in these tales. Instead of a fairy godmother, there is a tree that belonged to Cinderella's mother. Whenever Cinderella visits the tree, she makes a wish and receives whatever she asks for. When the prince of the kingdom announces a ball, Cinderella wishes to attend in a beautiful gown, and the tree grants her wish by giving her an elegant ball gown and glass slippers. After dancing with the prince, Cinderella's clothes return to her scullery-maid outfit and she hurries home. When the prince begins searching for the mysterious maiden, he demands that all the women in the town try on the glass slipper. Realizing that her daughter's feet are too large, the wicked stepmother goes to extreme length, cutting off the heel of one daughter and the little toe of the other to make the slipper fit. This version of the story is much more grimmer and far more unsettling than the one most people know today. Barrie's timeless tale of the boy who never grows up explores the adventures of Peter Pan, the Lost Boys, and Wendy Darling with her brothers John and Michael. While many are familiar with the story through films and plays, the intricate relationships among the characters often go unnoticed. Consider the dark and twisted relationship between Peter Pan and Captain Hook. Hook, an adult who's clearly troubled, possibly suffering from depression and alcoholism, harbors a deep-seated enmity towards Peter. This enmity manifests in Hook's repeated attempts to kill Peter, driven by a misguided sense of heroism. Yet there is an intriguing aspect to their dynamic. Hook's obsession with Peter suggests that without Peter Pan, Hook's life might lack purpose. Could it be that their animosity has evolved into a more complex, even affectionate bond? Then there's the relationship between Peter and Wendy. Wendy, who has left behind foggy London for the magical world of Neverland, is described as nearly a woman, indicating that she is transitioning from childhood to adulthood. Peter, ever adventurous and self-assured, might seem to be flirting with her, but his actions could also be interpreted as a genuine excitement for new companionship. Meanwhile, Wendy is falling in love with Peter. When she confesses her feelings, Peter responds by placing her in the role of a motherly figure, a stark contrast to her romantic hopes. This rejection feels like a harsh push into the friend zone, highlighting the complexities of their relationship. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!